Hello and welcome to this online music profile. I'm Simon Broughton, Editor-in-Chief of Songlines music magazine. This webcast is with the band VOLOSI, or at least 3 of the 5 of them, from the south of Poland, from Silesia. Please meet Stanislav, who's the cellist.
Hello, it's a pleasure.
Krzysztof, who's the violinist.
Hello, everyone.
And Zbigniew, also a violinist.
Hello.
VOLOSI is a meeting between classically trained musicians from Katowice and folk musicians from the Beskid Mountains. They've created a totally compulsive music from the combination of these traditions. Here's a taste. So the band feature a mixture of folk and classically trained musicians, and Krzysztof, I believe it all began at your wedding. What happened?
Yes, it's been always our dream with my wife to have traditional Polish music on our wedding ceremony. So you cannot believe it's so powerful and so full of emotions. They can play all the night for dancers and no one can get bored. So we just found them in this small village in Istebna, which is last village on the Carpathian Trail. Beautiful place where you have mountains all around and you see just wonderful landscapes everywhere, actually. It was like explosion of energy. So we thought, yes, it's this. We love these guys, and let's let them play for us.
Zbigniew, can you give an example of one of the tunes you might have played at that wedding?
But the real crucial story happened afterwards, because they invited us to spend honeymoon in the small remote house in the middle of nowhere. And then we started to play together. Stan, my brother, also came there, and we started to fall in love.
Stanislav, how do you go about creating that fusion between your classical training and the folk tradition?
For me, it was never too much about mixing genres, but much more about connecting very different people. For me, as classically trained musician with all the background, it was a bit like exploring a very new territory. It was, I think, the most interesting for me to learn a lot from people who play only by heart, don't have, you can say, education, but of course they had an education. It was from their parents, grandparents, very deep one.
Stanislav, coming back to you, how are these pieces created?
It may sound unusual, but we don't use any kind of notation. We don't use notes. So there are, of course, obvious limitations because of that. But for me, there are a lot of advantages, in fact, because somehow you have to work harder. And all the time you are in that creative process, you have to be 100% involved. And in that quite complex process, you never finish a piece. It's very interesting because you write it, then you rewrite it, you recreate it, and still after many concerts or even the record, you still change it and somehow adjust to a particular moment and your particular mindset. And this is very, very interesting for me.
Zbigniew, can you say a few words about the region you're from and how much of a living tradition there still is there?
Taki specyficzny mikroregion, gdzie łączą się 3 granice: Czechy, Słowacja i Polska. I Stebna jest taką miejscowością też Trójwieś, tak zwana się nazywa. Jaworzynka i Stebna i Koniaków zaliczają się do tej Trójwsi. I to jest właśnie położone na tej malowniczej granicy z Czechami, ze Słowacją.
And how much is there still a living tradition?
Ta tradycja tu ciągle jest żywa, jak najbardziej. Jeszcze nawet bym powiedział, że z biegiem czasu coraz więcej zespołów, coraz więcej muzykantów, tancerzy i dużo się gra i ciągle muzyka ludowa jest tu bardzo żywa i idzie też w bardzo dobrych kierunkach. Mamy tu dużo instrumentalistów bardzo dobrych.
Krzysztof, despite the strong influence of folk music, once you've made your Wolosi pieces, they really become concert numbers, I think, and you seem very conscious of your presence and your movements, almost choreography on stage.
Yes, it can look like a lot of movement on the stage, and really it's like always like a fight between us. But this movement is like, you can imagine like cooking big pot of soup, which you have to stir to make the fire, which can evolve to explosion.
Stan, this is a composition of yours. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
It was a snapshot of the moment, snapshot of our emotional set of the particular time in house of our friend Nias Diasamidze, the Georgian guy who comes from Caucasus. And the village where we made it is Tsavkisi. Then he said that must be the title. So generally I tend not to use too much defined titles for the pieces, because for me the most important is leaving a lot of space for imagination, and I believe that audience can go through it with us, and this is the magic of live performance.
And Zbigniew, how much do you enjoy taking this music in new directions?
No, przede wszystkim bardzo się cieszę, że właśnie możemy dotrzeć z tą naszą muzyką do szerokiego grona. Można powiedzieć, że wypłynęliśmy na szerokie wody z tą muzyką, tą tradycyjną, którą żeśmy rozwinęli z braćmi Stanisławem i Krzysztofem. Bardzo się z tego powodu cieszę, że ta nasza taka rdzenna muzyka, którą mamy gdzieś tu głęboko w sercu, może dotrzeć do tak szerokiego grona słuchaczy, praktycznie można powiedzieć na całym świecie.
The mixing and collaboration of classical and folk musicians doesn't always work, and I think yours really does. What's the secret?
I'm asking myself every time, actually. We are playing for over 16 years together and over 10 years as a proper band, VOLOSI. And we actually never got bored of ourselves, which is quite unusual. When we meet them, they give us freedom of what we did before and what we are doing sometimes also. And I think we are also giving some more freedom for the mountain people who can play just not inside the traditional borders, which are great, and they do it a lot nowadays too. But in this project, they can express themselves.
Krzysztof, Stanisław, Zbigniew, thanks very much for taking part and talking about VOLOSI. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.